And our panel now is called, quote, is there a killer app for TV, or is TV the killer app? And the basic premise of our question is, as we move into this next generation of TV era, combined streaming services, iPads, other types of devices, and we have services rendered straight on your TV, like from major cable companies, is the TV experience going to be relegated to just an app? Will we have many, many apps? Will we have many devices? What's going to happen? And in the next 45 minutes, we will actually learn the entire future of TV. So that's the burden on these fine gentlemen. We have a great bunch of guys. I'm going to ask each one to introduce himself. Michael, I'm sorry. I'm Jeremy Tillman, CEO of Digit. We make an app called Next Guide. It's a next-generation TV guide experience that brings together live TV and streaming services into one social discovery experience, and it's awesome. And enough about me. Michael,
great.
Tell us about yourself and where you work.
Hey guys, I'm Michael Fisher. I'm with Slingbox. I think most of you probably know Slingbox as a retail product. You can buy at Best Buy. We just actually updated the line not too long ago. We also have a line of business that goes after MVPDs, the big cable operators, satellites, et cetera, to integrate that solution into those subscriber services. And that's my focus. I work on the business development side for Slingbox.
Great. I'm Eric Elia. I just left a company called Brightcove after about 7 years, where I've been to this show quite a few times. I'm now running a consulting shop called Kincaid. We develop a lot of media and healthcare-related applications, a lot of mobile, a lot of tablet applications. We work for the likes of Showtime and Starz on some of their smart TV and social applications.
I'm David Adams, VP Corporate Development for CETA Broadband. We're actually a global firm that focuses on enabling IPTV and connected TV applications. We work with operators, media companies, and studios around the world to deliver video applications to primarily connected TV devices and set-top boxes.
Mike Fogner, I'm CEO of Snappy TV. I'm sure you guys have all heard Snappy TV. No, you haven't. Snappy TV is a live cloud video publishing platform, and basically what we built it about 2 years ago, and the problem we solve is that if you're streaming a live event, sports, news, and your audience is engaged with you on Facebook, Twitter, and a mobile device, you need a new way to reach them. So we have a live web-based publisher editing platform where you can go and cut clips, tweet them out to Facebook, post them on mobile devices, and reach your audience as they're watching your content.
Great. So, David, I'm going to ask you to start us off a bit because you're doing all sorts of interesting deployments internationally. You're probably seeing a little bit more than the rest of us the service as app world. Is that a fairly accessible? Is that a decent description with IPTV deployments, et cetera?
Well, so around the world, you've got an operator-dominated world as well, as opposed to here in the United States. And when you're in Germany, you're getting your content from Deutsche Telekom, or if you're in Malaysia, it's Telekom Malaysia, and in Scandinavia, maybe Viasat or Boxer, and that's your service provider, and it's coming through IPTV. And we're building app stores that are sitting on their set-top boxes that include content coming from all sorts of third parties, not only just games and whatnot, but real video services. And yeah, there's definitely a trend towards as opposed to rolling out a set-top box to all these customers, to just say, look, you've already got a Samsung in the room. Let's just put the Viasat service on that Samsung. And you can control it using an iPad app that you just download, and that model is starting to be rolled out globally as a huge cost savings and a much better user interface.
Cool. So I think the international perspective is often one to take in mind, even though obviously here in the States things will always roll out a little different. By the way, let's just do a quick show of hands. I want to get you guys involved for a second. I'll get the blood flowing again after the whole food. How many people here have Netflix on an iPad? Okay. How many people here are Hulu Plus subscribers? Amazon Prime? All right. And how many people here are cord cutters, with especially and cord cutters like religiously? Like, I hate my cable company people. All right. Well, because I run into a lot of people who say they cut the cord, and you get kind of 50-50. You get people who just kind of don't care; they're just not watching much TV, and then people are like, have a mission to prove. So, Michael, coming to you for a second here. We have a bunch of people here who are very familiar with apps. By the way, for disclosure, I was at Sling back in the early. We were just trying to figure out if we ever overlapped, and we didn't. You're out there talking to all the cable guys, where effectively with a Sling box inside, you could argue pretty well that the cable box with a Sling box inside is just an app on my iPad. What are you seeing? I mean, a lot of people jumping on board with those visions, a lot of friction. What's the easy path right now, and what do you see coming down the pipe?
Well, of course, we would say we are the easy path, right? But I think there's certainly a desire to sort of deliver the content the customer sees on the TV on an iPad app or their device on the one hand. On the other hand, you've got sort of headwinds that say the business model, either the business models are not there, or the content owners maybe are not on board with how the operator wants to do it. The content owner sees this new distribution platform and wants to maintain some of that control. So there's a lot of headwind there. There's a lot of wrangling over who controls that customer, who controls that user experience, and moving operator content or content owners' content from a set-top box to these other devices. It's been 20, 30 years before an operator said, sure, we'll allow other devices to play with our network, or we'll play on other devices. It's been that's taken a long, long time. And I think once that corner has been turned, I think it opens up a lot of opportunities, but it's taken a long time. And I think, probably the third issue here is sort of legacy boxes, right? Sort of legacy technology. If you have 21 million subscribers across the United States, you have different physical plants, you have different technologies. So how do you get that accomplished? But to answer your question, yeah, I think there's desire for it. The question is, how do you do it without? How do you do it with a positive business model, and how do you do it without upsetting the content operators?
Got it.
Yeah.
And Eric, so just bringing this question to you now. You now sit in a nice. Eric used to be a little bit more biased, and now he sits in a blissfully less biased role. Is that fair?
That's a fair way to look at it.
So, but you've seen a lot of this.
I also was at Comcast early on, so
right.
I went from extremely biased to somewhat biased to non-biased. Yeah.
But over the past few years, you spent a lot of time engaged with these companies. Do you see control? Is control moving to the consumer? Has it moved already? Is that a pipe dream?
Yeah, it's a pipe dream right now, I think. Control has ostensibly moved to the consumer, where we have lots of choice, all the different hands that raised in the room. But the fact is, if you like certain kinds of programming, sports, Emmy award-winning dramas, those sorts of things, you're not going to get those in any sort of kind of a la carte streaming service. You have to wait for those for a year to come out. And so I think scarcity of some of the top content that people are interested in are keeping, and sports as well as news, as well as kind of the value that comes from getting a lot of these channels together and keeping people on the incumbent subscription services. And so I think there's control for customers now, depending on the systems you use, based on what devices you can access your existing services on. I mean, if you use the Time Warner apps or the Xfinity apps on various services, or the Sling apps, they're quite nice. The UIs can certainly use work, but the fact that you can, in 1 or 2 clicks, get the latest episode of Homeland on a variety of devices in your household or your hotel room, it's pretty nice if you're up for paying $200 a month.
Mike, as your side of the spectrum at the startup level, what are your opinions on control and the consumer? I mean, I know your business, you have both a direct, and maybe you could give us the 15 to 30 second high level pitch on exactly what you guys do. But you guys have both a direct to consumer and a B2B offering.
Well, we stopped doing the direct consumer.
Okay, that's done.
A year ago, but we just sell directly B2B cloud editing software. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why, can you share us a little bit of the insight? What did you learn on your direct to consumer?
Yeah. So what we the original concept behind the company was, wouldn't it be great if you could go share, if you were watching TV and something cool happened, a soccer goal or a touchdown, you said, I want to grab that with my iPhone and share it with my friends. So instead of just tweeting about it, you could actually tweet the moment. And there are obviously rights issues involved with that, and we ended up going to market with that platform, but we essentially built tools to enable content owners to do that. So now, Turner Sports was tweeting out the Final Four, moments as they happened. They were tweeting it out, and that's kind of where it started. Ultimately, I think, CNN allowed you to grab it as a consumer. But I think what we learned is that, and I think there's applicable lessons here, is there are, rights holders and there's a very strong industry here that has a vested interest in keeping kind of status quo in the bundle. And I think I was at Yahoo. I used to be the GM of video, and I think if you imagine TV along the spectrum of the internet, like AOL and Yahoo. Used to go there for like a news story, right? And AOL and Yahoo had editors that would choose the news story and kind of curate this one feed, or maybe you go to news and sports, right? And you have this curated feed from one source. Then, Google is search, but then Twitter actually comes along and really changes things where you could curate your own feed. You could actually choose who is going to program content. And, TV is kind of like AOL and Yahoo. It's a walled garden portal. Well, NBC is curating what shows are in that linear channel. And I think the interesting thing is going to come is when you unbundle that, like Twitter did, but the question is when's it going to get unbundled? I think that's one of the questions that I have is, I think it could be really different if it's unbundled and you add this, what Twitter does to curate, but when is it going to get unbundled?
It could be, but economically it's not viable or proven to be viable for them to do that.
Yeah.
The operators. You work for an operator, right? Ostensibly.
Yeah, it's there's the economics behind it. I would also make the other case that the curation does provide some value, right? If you're, it's hard to find what you want to watch when you're sitting down with your significant other on a Saturday evening, and channels represent brands, and brands represent types of content. That adds value. If I know what's going to be on, what type of content is going to be on Bravo or A&E, et cetera, there is value there. But in the larger context, those channels being part of bundles, pulling them apart and making them a la carte, allowing them to be sold a la carte, there's some significant business model challenges there.
Well, so let's go into that. So I would say that the hypothesis Mike's proposing is that an unbundled world there are some cons to it, of course, but there are some pros to it. The consumer, maybe chooses what they want, maybe they pay for what they want, et cetera. I think both of you guys will assert that the economics don't really work. I'd have some agreement that the economics as they are today don't work. I would also propose the following. In the imminent future, what I'll call the infinite channel lineup, IPTV brings it, but even just having live TV plus Netflix plus Hulu, I have effectively infinite channels at home. And when I can easily flip from a live American Idol to last week's episode of Mad Men to season 1, episode 2 of The League, and on 3 different services back to back to back, curation's kind of gone out the window. Is anything going to pull that back in?
Those are channels. Those are options. Channels are different. Like,
that's my exact point.
If you Pandoraize TV, then you'd have a channel, and I think that would be really interesting.
Dave, are you seeing any of this anywhere else in the world? Are there any shining examples anywhere on Earth where there's a less channel bundle provider kind of model that's working?
I really think that we're still really early in this whole process of change in the TV industry. We can't even get across the entire U.S. with one application to deliver, content to all the viewers in the United States. You actually have to build about 15 different apps just to get close to all the households in America, to be on Xbox, PS3, Samsung, LG, Panasonic, Roku, Sharp, etc. The TV, industry is just trying to say, look, I'd like to just deliver what we currently have today. That's maybe curated on some MVPD or operator. I'd like to deliver that over the top instead. and I want everything to line up exactly like it used to be before. So, yes, it's an authenticated app, so you have to still be a subscriber, which you're probably seeing a lot of nowadays, all these new apps rolling out. But, we're getting our analytics right. We're getting the credit for Nielsen C3. We're protecting it with DRM, and we've got all the advertising lined up so that our back-end solutions actually can track what we sell. That is still what we're doing in 2013, and maybe in 2014 we can start talking about different models. And that's in the U.S. and primarily that they're leading this charge. I think talking about unbundling here in the U.S. is just really, really early, given that's the case.
Right.
Yeah, and I would just add that, your point about early in the process, we were looking at from network ad-supported model, 50, 60, 65-year-old business model, and from subscriber plus advertising on the cable networks, 30, 35 years, plus premium. It's taken a long time to build up those business models, and they're pretty tight. And so, what's it, $200 billion a year industry? So pulling that stuff apart. Obviously the content guys don't want to happen to them what happened to the recording industry in the early part of the decade.
But it wasn't the pulling apart that hurt the music industry. It was the piracy. And I think what's interesting is that is now to kind of flip the discussion around, like what might accelerate change. To look at it that way. I think piracy, if it were to result in or these over-the-top services drive more cutting or shaving of pay TV connections, we might see more change. It's interesting when you look back to kind of the Napster era, circa 1999, you look at the cost of a megabyte then, what it would take to download a song or an album. It's pretty close as of about a year and a half, 2 years ago, to the cost of saving and serving a movie in your home. If you look at bandwidth speeds, we're now at a speed where we now have speeds where it takes about as long to download a movie as it did to download an album in the 1999 era. And so suddenly we're in a place, and credit to Mitch Singer from Sony Pictures, who has a great infographic on this I saw in a presentation a few years ago, mapping this phenomenon. And that led them to start doing ultraviolet and that sort of thing. But you see now that the pieces are in place for piracy to really shift how we consume movies and TV, and certainly you hear anecdotally a lot of stories about college kids and others. That's how they're getting a lot of their programming. Question will be, is there enough there, plus the over-the-top, to perhaps force more accelerated change?
Sure. Actually, the CEO of LimeWire, I think it was yesterday, posed a question to the studio saying, it almost in defiance of your statement, actually saying, prove to us that piracy costs you money. Yeah. It's a really interesting dilemma, right? Because we all know that it's happening, but there's never been a thing that can causally link intent to purchase versus piracy. In other words, the college kids who are willing to torrent 10 movies a night, would they have bought any of them in an easy, open, inexpensive kind of available manner? And it's currently there's not. Yeah. It's an interesting topic.
Yeah. What I used to say.
Well, I just want to take us. I want to take the discussion to keep going down this potential threat to TV space. So I look at what YouTube's doing with their original channels. They're up to about a $300 million investment at this point, and it's showing pretty strong signs of life. They're producing some really good content, and you're coming about music. One of the key differences between TV and music is the cost to produce content. Right? Coldplay could walk into any recording studio on earth and make the next greatest album that is out there of their doing, with to some degree. Whereas you couldn't quite create the next episode of Game of Thrones with 20 guys and a bunch of iPhones, right? It's just not going to happen. So, do you guys see that the YouTube originals or other Funny or Die, College Humor, where do these guys all go when they grow up? And Eric, I don't know if you want to jump back in or down the pipe back there.
They become machinima.
I'm sorry?
They become machinima, right? YouTube channels that, I don't know why anybody watches machinima, but they're here in LA and they do great. They show people playing video games all day long. on YouTube, and they're one of the largest channels on YouTube. And it's astounding, but now they're branching out, as far as I can tell. Actually, no, didn't Google invest
Are they
in them?
branching out to TV?
But yeah, exactly.
You're seeing a lot of success stories coming up out of YouTube. You're not seeing much come down.
Exactly.
Right? Like the closest we're getting is Arrested Development on Netflix and House of Cards, which is great. But you're not seeing anything with kind of Lost-sized budgets, multi-camera shoots with that kind of quality and lighting, or these Emmy Award-winning kind of Breaking Bad, Mad Men kind of prestige shows. You're not seeing those yet. Right?
You look like you want to jump in? No?
Well, I just think the difference between YouTube and TV, YouTube is search based, and so there has to be intent, and so you have to find out about it and go. TV is totally different. You just turn and it's on. You turn the thing on and it's there, and there's a built-in audience there, and so the economics are just too markedly different. And until YouTube's gotten they're now the homepage has a feed, but they haven't really figured out this whole. Turn this thing on and it's just there. And they're a search company, so I'm not sure they ever will. And so I think that has to change. And I have some ideas on what would change, what could potentially change it. I think the unbundling has to happen, and I don't know. But I think that has to change in order for the big leagues not to be TV. Right now, there's a minor league, and as soon as you're good enough, you go to the bigs, and that's kind of how it is.
I wonder if some of this is generational, or how much of this gap we're seeing is generational. I was watching the gentleman from Alloy Digital this morning in one of the previous sessions. I don't know if some of you saw him speak about some of the shows they have, Smosh and Clever Entertainment News, and just aimed at a totally different audience than I'm going to generalize most of the people in the room and up here. And I think, to your point earlier, the curation or that instant on aspect, like their traffic's coming not just by people searching at YouTube, but there's an established audience coming back again and again, and that's probably through Facebook, it's through Twitter, it's through the subscriptions they have and the relationships they already have there. And I wonder if that's partly the instant on, the curation that's happening in all these various places. And what happens as that audience that's watching that sort of programming kind of graduates, gets jobs, time's more at a premium than money, and do the habits change, or is YouTube the primary place to go? Is the expectation free?
What happens is they get home at 5 o'clock and they just want to zone out for 4.5 hours like everybody else.
That may be.
That's where curation on these channels comes into play. Sorry.
No, what thought experiment? What if Twitter What if Twitter and every TV company in the world did a deal where at the beginning of every hour, each half hour, at Modern Family at 8:30 or 9 o'clock on Wednesday, tweeted the link to a on-demand player, live on-demand player, and you could follow ABC, or you could follow Modern Family, or you could follow these different things, and that was your. Would you now watch TV through Twitter if that happened?
No.
No?
It's funny that you'd say that, actually, because what you just described is the rebundling. Right? In other words, my theory, and I'm going to postulate that I think the single greatest threat to TV is the lack of brand awareness in the future of the TV industry, is that people become less and less aware of even what channel their shows are on, let alone the brands. I mean, I'm willing to bet we can name some popular TV shows right now, and people in the room not guess what channel they're on.
Right.
So doing it via Twitter versus doing it via 703. In other words, it's like, do I follow at Fox 703 or just watch channel 703? It's kind of a similar thing. To me, the question is, can I follow Eric, who might say, tonight, we're going to start with 30 Rock, and then we're going to switch over to Modern Family. Then we're going to watch this Revision 3 thing and watch some people play video games for half an hour, and then we'll come back and watch one last episode of Walking Dead.
But isn't ultimately the executive at ABC Eric? Like, there is somebody making that choice and essentially tweeting it out there, just using
As far
TV.
as I can tell, it's big focus groups.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, more importantly, though, there is this big engine of $80 billion of ad revenue in the United States to pay for all this, and you're not going to find that with a lot of these smaller, over-the-top kinds of storytelling. YouTube, for all its grandeur, is a $1.2 billion business. It's compared to, and it's the biggest, right? Compared to $80 billion in the U.S. for ads, and then globally, 160. That's a big engine that's going to roll, and when all those business systems in the back end are all hooked up in terms of just getting an ad dollar from here all the way to that television over the top, they're going to start offering services that are really interesting to people that they're going to want, and they're going to be able to compete with any kind of over-the-top a la carte solution.
So let me flip this around a little bit. So even the thing I proposed about following Eric and then watching what he watches, I actually don't believe in that either. To be honest, I don't believe in the Pandora for TV. And the reason why is, first of all, so neat stat is 96% of TV watching is not deliberate. So in other words, you might sit down very intentfully. I'm going to watch Idol or whatever. 30 minutes later, you have no idea what you're going to watch next. The average person checks their guide 4 times an hour. So it's an interesting piece of data amongst the sea of a la carte and curated worlds is that if we know that there's so little deliberate intent in TV watching, and we know that there are 54 streamable TV apps for the iPad that exist today, and those are premium quality content, HBO Go, ABC Go, etc. 54 of them. That's going to get bigger before it gets smaller, right? So do we move from a world where I'm going to go from app to app to app to watch my TV? Am I going to start watching 30 Rock on the NBC app, switch over to the FX app to watch the league, go to live TV for an hour, and then come back to the AMC to go? Is that what's going to happen?
I do have to comment on one application we built for an Australian telco, where we actually just unified everything, which was called the Unified App. So whether it was broadcast, cable, or over the top, it all looked like the same EPG. You just went through, and you didn't know if it was coming through the internet or through broadcast.
Explain this a bit further, though. From a consumer perspective, were they launching apps, or was it just show then show? What was happening?
So, that was the interesting thing, is that they got an EPG, and it just said what was on. And whether it was through broadcast or through over the top, they didn't know. And they'd click a button, and that show would appear. And so it was as if it was all just through the cable. But, you could just add a new channel on the fly over the top quite easily. You can add VOD, things like that. And the consumer wouldn't notice the difference. And so there was no actually launching of apps, which was kind of interesting.
Do you think there's any, I'm going to float that into the never ever coming here category of things. What do you think?
Well, in answer to the 54, I think it probably will be the foreseeable future. I think that I think the content owners are going to want to retain as much control over that experience on these new platforms as possible. So I think we will see 54 is probably the starting point, right? Depending on the type of content you enjoy, that's the app or the brand or the channel. That's the app you're going to use. I think there are other ways of doing that. There's a way to pull all that content into one, but even that's challenging, right? There's all that content into one, right? There's on demand, there's DVR, there's cloud content, there's linear content. It's hard to pull that into and that's the missing piece, and maybe we'll talk about a little later, is just the quality of that user experience, right? So it's not just recommendation engine, it's how do I navigate, how do I find what I'm looking for? But I think the desire on the part of the content guys to own that experience and the business relationship between the content and the distributor, I think that's going to leave us in a place where we're going to have at least 54 apps for a while.
We're building 40 of them, so yeah, I'd agree with that.
By the way, if there's a burning question, if there's any burning questions from the audience, give a little. I can come to you right now. We can keep going for a bit.
Before he died, Steve Jobs said he figured out television, and the comment that I've seen about that since then points to exactly the kind of controller application that integrates all these different possibilities, which they call two-screen apps. What's the prevent? I work in the music business, so I'm keenly aware of what can happen when a 1,000-pound gorilla comes into the marketplace and controls, say, start to push the industry. So even though I take all the things you've said for granted, what's to prevent Apple or Google from essentially pushing this for the benefit of the consumers for a simplified interface?
So the question for those who can hear in the recording is, the shortest version is what stops a company like Apple and possibly Google from kind of walking in and, if I'm going to rephrase this, tell me if I get this right, but giving the keys of the kingdom to the consumer and saying you're in charge now, have at it what you want. Is that?
Building a unified interface.
Yeah, but that's creating one simplified experience where the consumer can pick and choose, basically the iTunes for everything.
Right. But at the same time, splitting ad revenue, maintaining copyright.
Yeah. So it's Apple does it right. Let's just put that down as the footnote. I'm going to make one first comment, then I think I saw Eric and Michael's hands jump up. So first of all, I think Apple already offers that. I think to those who are in the Apple iOS, OS X ecosystem, and iTunes and iCloud and AirPlay and Apple TV and iPad, you've pretty much got that right now, and people who use it love it, and that's why they do it. And the question is, can they go tip over from 5 million or so households into 100 million or so households? Eric, you go first.
Well, and can they get the programming that would allow that set of technologies to get to the place where you're describing? I mean, to answer your question specifically, what's holding it back is Apple and Intel, Amazon, Google, all the people trying to build these services, Netflix, Hulu, cannot get access to the breadth of content that's available, both live and on demand, in season or same day and date that it's happening. Starts with news and sports and goes to pre-recorded programming.
I like how you threw Intel in there with Apple just like that.
What's that?
I like how you threw Intel in there with Apple just like that.
Intel, there was an article last year.
I'm just kidding. I think yes, it's established that they're trying to do something.
I'm not saying it. I'm going to say Intel. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago. I think it's interesting. It's illustrative about what we're talking about here. So, big company builds great technology. There was an article in the Journal about them trying to get into the content game by building a new over-the-top TV service with hardware and services, and I think they described an interesting new ad model, and I'll just say it's interesting, where there was some sort of person detection in the room, so they would identify who was watching programming and be able to serve more accurate advertising. Also, just to know that someone was in the room and they weren't in the bathroom and missing the ads.
I want to come back to the original question and hand over to Michael.
I think there's a couple. No, please.
I would just say that Google you can make the case that Google's already tried that, right? They've tried to make the unified interface, that you bring in all these disparate content sources together. One of the challenges is, it's sort of like you can make the case the user experience wasn't all that great, and the other piece is you could build some of the technology, but to Eric's point, you have to have the content rights. You have to have the content rights. I think Apple probably will make a big run at this, but you have to have the content rights. Like that's the thing that holds them back. And I just make one other point here is I thought about this. If you think about what Apple did to music pre-iPod or with the iPod and what they did to the smartphone industry or the carriers, I don't know if the operators and content folks are in the same position that the music industry was in the late 90s.
That's a good point.
My only point was it's a moving, the whole thing moves along over time. It's taken Apple 10 years from the start of the iPod to starting to discuss a video service that might have these kind of features. And if they have the kind of leverage over the video industry and the ability to integrate customer revenue, advertising revenue, all these other things, it's going to start to look more and more attractive, just like it's done to the music industry, who have, let the barriers move and they've liberalized the whole system so that the users can do more interactive stuff. For example, they've written licenses that have allowed the technology always precedes.
Sure, I want to move the conversation ahead a little bit. So I think it's a valid point. I think But it really is important to understand that the massive difference in what was happening to music at the time versus what is happening to video and TV at the time. In other words, here you already have a world where Netflix is out there for $8 a month. You can stream as much as you want. There's no way you can possibly argue that the heavy Netflix users dollar per hour thing makes sense. It doesn't work, right? But things are working for them with the deals they currently have. I was having a conversation yesterday with a TV industry exec, and he made an interesting comment, which is basically, for better or for worse, because of the deals and as they exist between content holders, distributors, networks, all the different players involved, and the longevity of these deals, and the bundling nature of these deals, the TV industry has in many ways accidentally shielded itself from as many problems. It's like the whole debate about can HBO just go direct to consumers. No. It's not, just because a bunch of bloggers wish something to happen just doesn't, it's folly. It's like saying that, the Dodgers could decide to leave MLB and just play baseball on their own in a stadium somewhere. There's too much at stake. So, but it's not to say Apple's not going to do anything. I think that also would be just as equally folly to say.
I thought it was interesting. Most people don't know exactly what Apple's doing or their plans are. There's a lot of guessing. But the thought was early on they were going to build a cable killer type of service. And then the reports in the press were that they were going to build a cable complement. They were now trying to embrace and work with the existing industry, try to build something that worked for them. Maybe they get into essentially the set-top box business with benefits. So I think that's just interesting in itself, that the nature of these deals, 20, 30-year deals, programming deals, to be able to get into that mix, that it's a different approach to the industry they'd have to take.
Knowing Apple, they're probably doing both.
Yeah.
Start with the deals, leave the deals behind.
Yeah. But that's really complex. Just as a note, when Netflix was going down in Latin America, my understanding was they had a team of lawyers just looking at legal docs to figure out which movies they had rights to and which ones they did not. Over 10,000 titles, one by one, looking at the actual contract just to figure it out. Do I have the rights to show this movie in Latin America, and which countries in Latin America? And you just multiply that out by all the different TV shows and who has the rights to monetize which TV show in which country. Apple would have a nightmare trying to figure that out, because advertising does run this business, and a different agency has the rights to sell different pieces, and that's what makes the whole industry go around.
Just a little anecdote on that. I used to work for the cable operators years ago, launching VOD. I remember talking to a little PBS affiliate and wanting some of his content on my VOD server, and he wanted to. Their business model is different than, say, cable nets. They wanted to give me the content, but their contracts with the content owner and their contracts with, say, the Teamsters Union didn't allow for this content to be used on that platform. Now, this is 6, 7, 10 years ago, but the contracts have to be there. To your point.
So we've got a few minutes left again. Any burning questions?
Yeah. So I had a question. Just want to get your opinion on this. And I know we're talking about content being put onto sort of the streaming applications, and I'm probably less concerned about that. And I think you guys hit it on the head in terms of the complications and the issues with those moving over to streaming platforms. However, I want to get your opinion on content that will be growing up from the streaming areas. And yes, I'm kind of hesitant to say, look at them now, they're small, they're only about $1.2 billion, because that's what broadcast said about cable, and then eventually cable wasn't so small. So how do we see that, and if you guys can pull out your crystal balls and just kind of think about that as that industry starts to grow, because then there's sort of two alternate universes in which you still will have broadcast and cable, and they will be producing content, and then you'll have cheaper content that doesn't have, yes, the glitz of, sort of Hollywood studios, but it has eyeballs, and those eyeballs then sort of take away from, sort of the cable operators, and they continue to grow within a streaming environment.
Take a step with that. I think there's one big thing to recognize is the shelf life of video is a lot different from music, and there's if you think of it, it's two buckets. One is live video has very, like sports or this conference has a very short shelf life. You know, 3 weeks from now, nobody's going to rewatch this panel. But then you have like Game of Thrones, which has a very long shelf life and tends to be like big budget, well produced, well edited, you know, stuff. And so if you think about that, those two different worlds, I think one of the things that's happening on the streaming side is that you have LiveView backpacks, Teradek encoders with 4G Wi-Fi antennas, and like right now, every weekend we stream hundreds of high school football games that get live edited, and so parents of these kids have like ESPN in a box. Like their kid's touchdown is tweetable, like it's posted to Facebook, posted to Fox Sports within seconds of their kid scoring a touchdown. They can email it to grandma. And so it's like the cost of production of live content has gone so low that it's basically human cost. Like the upfront hardware is now, you know, a couple $1,000 you can get started with this stuff. And so what that does is, you know, right now across the country, in 2 years, every major high school football game will be streamed online. And in Friday night in Odessa, Texas, the number one thing that everybody wants to watch is high school football. And so that's going to change categorically a lot of what people watch, because that content is now available. And the other thing that's changed is that Facebook, Twitter, and these different kind of social networks and different ways to broadcast let you reach people to let them know where it is. Here's the URL. It's now live. And so I actually think that is from the ground up, one of the things that I see that's going to change is you can now tell people that stuff is on, and you can very, very cheaply produce it. And so I think that group of content, this live, perishable stuff, is going to now start to dominate a lot, or not dominate, but I think that's going to be growing. It's a really interesting market.
What about you guys? So I want to get a little closer to the root. By the way, I really like that story. By the way, I heard another one is some app that lets people who go to the same live concert can all upload their video to the same place.
Right.
And they'll like remix it into one. My co-founder loves this thing. I can't remember the name of it. But what do you guys think? Are we going to see eyeballs start drifting away from the $10 million per episode Game of Thrones to the Epic Meal Times of the world? Is that a shift of eyeballs? Is that additive eyeballs? Yes, maybe. Thursday?
I think it's almost like the economy where you're seeing the middle start to get affected, where you see
What's
this.
the middle?
The middle class of TV, whatever that is.
Middle class TV.
Is,
Well, it's training.
It's daytime programming and local news.
yeah, I mean, have you watched many movies that have gotten made recently? It seems to me like the quality of cinema is at its absolute lowest, yet that it's been in my life. Yet the quality of television is at the highest it's ever been. You have all these great, Kevin Bacon has a new show that's going to be coming, and all these great programs. The narrative storytelling is the best it's ever been, and then you have sports and news and this lower cost television. So it's I totally lost your original question.
Are we shifting our eyeballs to
I think we are.
Epic Mealtime?
I think it's shifting high and low, and Epic Mealtime is going to be in the low category for now.
Michael?
I'm just sitting here thinking that there's you break down content and genre, and somebody talked about sports. Sports is a huge driver. Not-for-profit content like PBS and the dramas you find out. Maybe YouTube and that source of content is its own genre with its own business model, right? I mean, setting aside the user experience issues with YouTube, I mean, I don't know if anyone's tried ShowU. I think it's called ShowU. Is a great app that pulls together a lot of YouTube content. You combine that, sit on the couch with your Apple TV. That is actually a pretty good experience, and you can kill a good 25 minutes watching content. And they do a good job pulling it together, and the large screen, it works. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think you could look at that, at the content from users delivered in that way as its own genre, competing alongside. But it's not going to be the Game of Thrones. It's not going to be the storytelling. It's not going to be the sports.
I'll throw it in. I'll give my 2 cents on it. I think I don't think we should base future TV watching patterns on young people's activities today, because, for lack of a better phrase, young people become old people, and old people become more sedentary, and old people have kids, and old people have married, and old people have jobs, and old people don't like any of that. And that's going to sound terrible, but at the end of the day, the bulk of TV watching happens by a population that is not active and super and doing and has 4-minute attention spans, right? 6 of the top 10 shows. How many people know what network 6 of the top 10 shows are on? No. CBS. Okay. How many people here have watched one of the top 6? How many people here think they watch one of the top 6 shows on television? Right? They're the top 6. If nobody in this room watches it, it's something to think about because NCIS is number 1, and the other 5 are other things on CBS that I don't watch because
they all have the title CSI.
Wrong demographic. Yeah, there's CSI.
It's
CSI.
LA, New York.
It's CSI Burbank and CSI Omaha and all these. Look, it's on Neil's side. I pay attention to the ratings because I have to. But fundamentally, it's not that it's bad content. In fact, actually, the quality of that programming is better than it's ever been. CSI shows are highly produced. They're good content. They're not engaging to. That's what demographics are for. The point being, I don't think that just because a 20-year-old spends an hour a day on YouTube watching kids fall off their bikes means that when they're older and they themselves have kids and they themselves want to sit on the couch and drown out their credit card debt and all these things, that they too will not turn to investigative crime dramas, health comedies, and what I call train wreck television. And I think you guys can guess what that stuff is. But that's the Bravo. Last question. We are going to be out of time, and I hope it's a quick question.
To your point, though, some of us in the media business remember what ESPN looked like when I first started so many years ago. And I think that everything you say has a ring of truth to me, but everything you say, I'm thinking this year or next year or the following year. Google might do $2 billion next year. We saw the folks from Alloy Digital earlier talk about Smoosh and Clever. Those young people that are watching that, what Smoosh looks like or Clever looks like years from now, a few years, they well may keep those viewers forever, as ESPN has done, and become the networks that we watch today. Travel Channel back in the day was really bad. It's beautiful now. And so the point is that I think that we should, a dollop of caution and a big, question in my mind is I think we're going to see a lot of these web-only and other, which to us, as we're older, look like they don't have legs, and these things are going to be
look at Revision
the giant
3.
networks in the years to come.
Revision 3 got acquired by Discovery. It is premier quality content that is basic. Epic Mealtime is now owned by Discovery, or the distribution rights to Epic Mealtime in the United States are now owned by Discovery.
It's also it's funny that you use ESPN. Like in the bottom right-hand corner of ESPN right now, it says Watch ESPN. You go check scores on ESPN, and it says Watch this live, watch this live, watch this live. Like ESPN is a fantastic second screen iPhone app that I tune into all the time. And so I think it's one of the things we don't talk about, like the ESPN versus Comcast. That's a battle right there. Like that's, as soon as ESPN reaches some subscriber base for Watch ESPN, what do they need Comcast for?
Guys, we are out of time. I appreciate the conversation here. Thanks for great questions. Good audience.